I haven't thought about this in years. It's funny how pretty much every story on here starts that way. I was in the 5th grade when all this started. Now, let me first say, there were many events that happened from when I was in the 5th grade to about 8th, but here I'm only really gonna talk about 2. Someone knocked on the door. Back then, my neighborhood was considered to be pretty safe. We never locked our doors because we never really had a reason to. So I went to the door and I opened it, but nobody was there. I honestly didn't think much of it. Probably one of my brother's friends or something. So I turned on the porch light and went outside. Once again, for as far as I could see, there was no one. I went back inside and sat in the living room to watch house until my mom got home. A half an hour goes by and I'm still sitting on the couch which overlooks my kitchen, the kitchen window, and partly out into my backyard, though at this time it was like 8 p.m. so it was fairly dark. With my head facing the left side of the room watching my show, I saw something dark flash by the window. It was quick, and it was only out of the corner of my eye, but there was something that flashed by the window. A few more minutes go by, and I'm texting my best friend, Sam. I told her I thought someone might be trying to prank me or something when I started to just feel really uneasy, like someone was watching me. I looked up, and I shit you not, there was the outline of a person all in black in the fucking window. I just sat there, paralyzed, staring at him, and he lightly knocks on the window and does one of those close finger waves that you do to children before he disappears. In my head I was like, no fucking way that just happened, and even if it did, I was sure it was just one of my brother's friends pranking me, but either way I wasn't gonna stay in that living room to just let them mess with me some more. I booked it up to my room and locked the door. My mom came home about 20 minutes later with brother Harrison. I asked my mom if she saw anyone out there and my brother if he intentionally had someone mess with me, but they both told me Harrison really wasn't that kind of person to do something like that, but I figured with it being so close to Halloween, anything was possible. I tried to put it out of my head, and that was that, for now. Some insight of what happened in between these two events. I'm fairly certain it wasn't my brother's friend. To this day I still honestly don't know who it was, or what they really looked like, but after that day I started noticing someone in the backyard. They would just be standing there with black shoes, black pants, a black hoodie pulled up, black gloves, and I was never able to see his face, so I assumed a black mask. Each time this happened I would run and tell my mom, but by the time she got there, they were always gone. I started getting phone calls from an unknown number around that time too, of just silence and occasional breathing, but nobody ever said anything. It only happened a few times, probably less than 20, but they would happen at random times throughout the day and night, though mainly during light. For a long time I was the only one who ever physically saw any of this happening, because it pretty much always happened when I was home alone, or really late that night. Until one day my mom, my neighbor, and I were on the porch talking when I asked him if he ever saw anybody lingering around our backyard. My mom was quickly like my lip, because I guess she didn't want me to sound crazy to the neighbor, since I kept saying all this was happening and she never saw the guy. I mean, she picked up silent phone calls, but for some reason she never really believed me about the guy in the backyard. But to my surprise, he told me he did. He ending up telling my mom and I that he was sitting on his back porch next to ours with his girlfriend when a man, all in black, came out from behind a tree. He started walking, and then running towards them, when my neighbor, who had a license to carry, pulled out his firearm and told the guy to stop running. The man didn't stop. Matt, the neighbor, shot at the ground and the guy finally stopped. He turned around and started running in the opposite direction, tripping over a branch and then getting up and disappearing. I felt so relieved, thinking that had to be the guy and that surely now he'd never come back, but, of course, that's not how it happened. Now, before I get back to it, let me explain. My mom didn't frequently leave me home alone. A lot of the time I was left with my brother, who was 7 years older than me, or a family member, but there were few times where my mom had worked, went shopping, or went out that I would elect to stay on my own rather than tag along or go somewhere else. So on this night, I was home alone once more. I was in the living room, and because things had sort of died down a bit with the man in the backyard, I felt comfortable enough to sit in my living room and watch some TV again. This time I can't remember what I was watching, but just like the first fucking time, something black flashed by the window. At this point I was like, knew her, this can't be happening again, and I didn't immediately want to call my mom and ruin her night if it turned out to not be that big of a deal. So I just stared intently at the window, just waiting for him to pop up like he did last time. During what felt like an eternity, and was probably only 5 minutes, I had muted my TV. There was an eerie silence, like in those action movies where they're like, it's quiet. Too quiet. At that moment I could probably hear the pin drop. But instead I began to hear my back door rattle slightly. My heart dropped and started racing. It felt like it was gonna leap out of my chest. Bang! They were trying to break down the door. From where I was, whoever was at the back door couldn't see me. As I heard my door being broken into, my fight or flight response must have kicked in, and I grabbed my phone, unlocked my front door, and hauled us across the street. I started hauling my eyes out as I ran down random side streets and alleyways to get as far away from my house as possible. I ended up sitting under a lamplight, pretty much on the other side of town. I called my mom and her boyfriend, Kyle, but they could barely understand me as I was blabbering so much. When I was finally able to calm down, I explained to them what happened and where I was, and they immediately came and picked me up. In the car, I felt so much safer. Kyle was a big guy. He did construction and worked on houses. He had muscle and he was a scary dude if you didn't know him. When we got home, Kyle went in first. He told us to stay in the car, and from inside the house he yelled out that the back door was wide open. He went room to room, floor to floor of our house, searched our backyard, shed, everything, but whoever it was gone. My mom later tried to comfort me and say maybe it was our cat, but we both know that it wasn't the cat. Our back door is pretty hard to get into, and that fucker was wide open. I saw the guy in our yard a few times after that, always just standing there in one spot, and I started sleeping with a knife secretly tucked away by my bed. But eventually he stopped coming around. It took a while, but he did, and luckily nothing like that ever happened again. I think it's also very important to add that nothing had been stolen from my house that night. There were no drawers open, and the door to my basement is right across from the back door. It's often kept open, and it had some pretty expensive equipment down there, but it wasn't even touched. So because nothing from my house was taken, we didn't call the cops because, like I said, for a long time my mom didn't believe me, and once she did, we had no evidence, and eventually it all just stopped anyway. To this day, I have no idea what that man wanted, or why he tried to break into my house, but my mind continues to come up with some ideas. I was only 10 or 11 years old at the time it all started, and I was probably around 12 or 13 when he tried to break in. Both times I was home alone. I'm almost 20 now, and although I don't really think about this too much anymore, I still always find myself watching the window and the back door of my house. Sometimes I still get that eerie feeling when I'm home alone, but I can probably blame this subreddit for that. I'm sure he's been gone a long time now. Though, I don't think I'll ever be able to go into the backyard alone.